aliens, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, a professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And in this hour, we're going to talk about colonizing the universe. Not just colonizing the moon or colonizing Mars. We're talking about going into the universe itself. And with us today to separate science from science fiction is Professor Chris Empey, Distinguished Professor at the University of Arizona in Tucson, author of a new book, Beyond Our Future in Space. What it would be like to colonize Mars? What about going beyond Mars to the asteroid belt and Jupiter and Saturn? What about going beyond Saturn and going all the way out to the nearby stars? And perhaps even going through the galaxy itself. Once again, Professor Empey is an astronomer, not a science fiction writer, and we're going to talk about the science of colonizing the solar system and colonizing the universe. We should also mention that the reception we got with him is a little bit degraded. He's in Rome right now, speaking at the Vatican Observatory. That's right, the Catholic Church has an observatory, is very serious about the Big Bang Theory and the latest developments in astronomy, and he's actually at the Vatican Observatory where we caught up with him in Rome. And we should also point out that I'm also on a book tour. Go to my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org. It lists the cities I'll be traveling to. And just remember, my latest book is called The Future of the Mind. It was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list 2 years ago when it came out in hardback. Now it's in paperback form. Everything you've seen in the science fiction movies of Harry Potter and Star Trek, things like telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, uploading memories, we can do it. Believe it or not, we can do it in the laboratory because of advanced physics. So find out about all these developments in my book, The Future of the Mind. By the way, the United States Pentagon takes it very seriously. They've already dumped $150 million for our wounded warriors from Iraq and Afghanistan to bypass their damaged spinal cords, to directly connect the living brain to an exoskeleton where they can then walk. They can then manipulate objects with their arms and legs and live a semi-normal life, once again with the power of sheer thought. All of that contained in my book, The Future of the Mind. But once again, in this hour, we're going to talk about the universe. First of all, NASA has said that, yes, Mars is it. The next target is not the moon, though, of course, we'll be going to the moon, but the next target is Mars. We hope to go to Mars somewhere in the 2030s, perhaps 25 plus years from now. But what's beyond Mars? What about going to Jupiter and Saturn and the asteroid belt? Some billionaires have said that perhaps we should begin the process of mining the asteroid belt. And perhaps life may exist on moons. Moons of Jupiter and Saturn that have liquid oceans heated up by volcanic forces. Forget sunlight. We're talking about moons that are in a frozen environment heated up by volcanic tidal forces, meaning they have liquid oceans, perhaps even room temperature. Perhaps you might even be able to take a swim in the oceans of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, over 1 billion miles away from our sun. And then what lurks beyond that? What about going to the nearby stars? Stephen Hawking once again made headlines by advertising the first starship, not like the Enterprise, but the size of a postage stamp driven by laser beams. Okay, let's take a short commercial break. And after the break, we're going to bring on Professor Chris MP, author of the book Beyond, Our Future in Space. And give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129, and you can be on Science Fantastic.
For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Hi folks. In a world of GMO, genetically modified organisms that is, chemicals, processed foods, and a healthcare system that's unraveling like a cheap suit, it's time to prepare. God created herbs, and herbs help man. Our body can heal itself, just sometimes we need assistance. You need some help? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Our mild detox is quite powerful with its unique blend of 8 different herbs. And if you're looking for more, our non-GMO supplements will help you with different needs you might have. Health should be a top priority. Take care of your health naturally. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Give your body a treat. Let the herbs do their thing naturally. Read all the testimonies on the website, GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Sickness and viruses are like intruders, and herbs are like warriors. Let the tea work for you. GetTheTea.com.
As a business owner, or CEO for that matter, are you frustrated with the money you're wasting on advertising? How do I know it's being wasted? Because you see your advertising as an expense. I started my company because I was tired of seeing passionate business owners waste advertising dollars. So what if I could show you how to make your advertising a profit center in 30 days, guaranteed? I know what you're thinking. That's bull. Then challenge me. At no cost to you, I'll show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. If this is important to you, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. In this hour, we're going to talk about the potential of reaching out to the planets and eventually the stars. This is something straight out of science fiction, but it has seized the imagination of professional astronomers and astrophysicists. And the question is, can we begin the process of colonizing, well, the universe? With us today is Professor Chris MP. He's a distinguished professor of astronomy at the University of Arizona. He's the author of an exciting new book, which I highly recommend. The book is called Beyond, Our Future in Space. And we should also point out that he's written a number of books, including How It Began and How It Ends. So, Chris, glad you could be on Science Fantastic.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Michio.
Okay, first question for you is, how did you as a youth first get interested in science?
Well, as an astronomer, there's usually two ways in. One is, you have a little telescope and you just trade it out for bigger and bigger telescopes. But I lived in a cloudy place. I grew up in Britain, although my accent doesn't show it. The other way is through physics, and so I got in as an undergrad in physics, thinking astronomy was sort of the Wild West of physics, so that drew me in.
Okay. Well, let's just jump right into some of the substance of your book. First of all, you've probably been asked this question a million times. Why should we explore outer space anyway? Because it's expensive. It costs about $10,000 to put a pound of anything just in near-Earth orbit. That's a lot of money. We have so many problems on the Earth. So why explore outer space?
There are several reasons. I mean, the cost it's true, and we have problems on Earth. It's true, and we're not really built to survive in space. That's also true. But I think we're sort of genetically built to do it. We're explorers. I comment in the book on this DRD2, a variant of a single gene that's associated with migratory behavior of early humans, and it's correlated with risk-taking behavior in modern humans. We have a high incidence of this gene, and it seems to be that it's built into us to do the exploration that's not required for survival. We're just doing it out of curiosity.
And I remember as a child watching President Johnson on television. The TIROS weather satellite just went into orbit. People thought it was a waste of money to have a weather satellite out there, but it detected for the first time in world history a hurricane, a gigantic hurricane headed toward Texas, and they were able to alert the people, get evacuations going. People could hunker down and protect their property. And I'll never forget, that night, LBJ came on TV and said, tonight, the space program has paid for itself. And you know something? He was right. Well, let's just jump right into the content of your book. Let's talk about the moon and, of course, Mars. Mars is the target that NASA has fixed on. 2030, they say, could be the earliest that we go to Mars. So first of all, tell us how difficult it is to go to Mars, and what would it be like to actually land on Mars?
Well, for people, it's hard. We've been to the moon, although not for almost 2 generations now. And it's, 50 to 80 times further away, and therefore that much more difficult. It's a lot of exposure to radiation for the humans who would spend 2 years in space, more or less. And once you get there, you're very far from help, and so you're going to have to survive with what's available. And actually, that's the second reason, I think, exploring space is sort of inverting the argument that we don't belong there, to say that when we learn how to live on a place like Mars, it'll teach us how to live more parsimoniously on the Earth, because we'd have to mine the Martian soil to get oxygen to breathe, to get water to drink, and we'd have to be self-contained, and that's sort of how it'll have to happen. But that's hard, and that's why it's going to take 20 years.
And you've probably seen the movie The Martian, starring Matt Damon, and movies like that. What are your thoughts about Hollywood and whether or not they got it right with movies like The Martian?
Sure. I generally try to give Hollywood a pass on doing science in the movies, just because it's better to have science in the movies than to have some, bogus ideas being presented as science. The Martian got it mostly right. They got a pass on the Martian storms that sort of set up the whole story, because they just wouldn't have been fierce enough to do that damage. But in general, it's pretty accurate, and it certainly gave a sense of how, to struggle against that planet to survive and feed yourself, you'd have to be, working on all cylinders.
Okay, and let's take it now one by one. To go to the moon, well, it only took about 2 to 3 days to go to the moon. To go to Mars would take about a year to go to Mars, another year to come back. That's like 2 years. Plus, you're going to be staying on Mars for several months. And some people think that that's stretching it. The world's record for being in outer space for a human is a little over a year, set by the Russians. So do you think we're up to it? Do you think that we can really do it? That is a 2-year mission to Mars?
I think we can. Of course, the little ugly truth is that there are one-way missions to Mars. Mars One, the Dutch private venture, is a one-way trip. And actually, NASA was sort of outed on having as a backup plan that's cheaper, of course, a one-way trip to Mars, and you'd be able to find people who are willing to go there and die there. Elon Musk has said he wants to die on Mars. So if you want to save money, you do a one-way trip. But I think there'll be people willing to take the risk of the 2-year trip and all that radiation exposure and the risk of really a catastrophe. I mean, there's going to be significant odds that you don't come back if you go to Mars, and you're one of the first.
Okay, and you mentioned Elon Musk, who is the billionaire behind Tesla Motors and behind SpaceX and PayPal. He was also quoted in the press. He subsequently had to clarify it, but he said that we have the possibility of nuking Mars, that is, dropping hydrogen bombs on the polar ice caps to melt them to begin the process of turning Mars into a habitable planet. What are your thoughts, therefore, about terraforming Mars?
Yeah, I mean, Musk is nothing if not ambitious. And so what he was alluding to is that if you want to terraform Mars, you basically have to kickstart a greenhouse effect. And the way you have to do that is to very quickly liberate a lot of the frozen carbon dioxide from the polar regions. And the way to do that, is by nuking it. That's probably not a way that the U.S. government would approve of. In fact, NASA's taken a very cautious approach to Mars. The missions that we send there sort of clean up after themselves. We try very hard not to contaminate the planet. So NASA's approach is pretty far from what Elon Musk is talking about. But even with Musk's concept, terraforming is a huge endeavor. Most studies that I've seen cost it out at something of order $1 trillion, and it's going to take generations, a couple hundred years to do the full terraforming of Mars. It's a fantastic endeavor.
Well, we had Dr. Robert Zubrin on our airwaves, and he said the following, that if you could raise the surface temperature of Mars just by a few degrees, which of course is an enormous task, then you begin to melt some of the carbon dioxide and ice, and they generate greenhouse gases, which then raise the temperature even more. So you have to reach a certain point, a point, and then you have the runaway greenhouse effect take place. Well, what are your thoughts? Is this simply science fiction, or what are your thoughts about the idea that if you could raise the temperature just for about a few degrees on the surface of Mars, it would set off a chain reaction of events, and it would basically be self-generating?
I think that is correct, and that's pretty much the kind of argument Musk is making. He's thinking of the fastest way to kick off that feedback loop and the greenhouse effect. So that definitely, you can do that. The trouble is full terraforming of Mars is a 3-step process where that's just the first step. The second step would be to seed microbes on Mars to generate oxygen to be part of an atmosphere you could breathe. And you'd also need to add a buffer gas like nitrogen as we have on the Earth, and there'd be another mechanism for that with a different set of microbes. And only then could you start to develop a full biosphere. So this 3-stage process is really what would take centuries.
Okay, well, some people say, well, the pioneers did it by living off the land. They came from England and from Europe, and they landed on our shores. They didn't bring that much luggage with them. They farmed, they were able to shoot animals. But on Mars, well, there are no animals, there's no soil, and it's frozen solid. And so what are your thoughts about living off the land? For example, melting the ice and separating out the hydrogen and oxygen from water to create breathable oxygen and rocket fuel. So what are your thoughts about living off the land?
Absolutely. That's certainly doable, and the Martian had that as part of the premise, too. So if we give up the idea of turning the whole planet into a place we could live, and we live in sort of protected bubble domes, then absolutely. There's machines, this is pretty simple chemical physics to take Martian soil. Basically, a ton of Martian soil is like a cubic meter, gives you about 1 liter of water. That's pretty impressive. So there's your water. You can chemically separate it to hydrogen and oxygen, and the oxygen you can breathe or you can use to make rocket fuel. So those the three basic ingredients you'll need to survive, as well as making soil and growing food hydroponically. Yes, all those technologies are really well understood and have been for decades. It's just a matter of putting enough infrastructure on the Martian surface to get it going, which is going to cost $100 or $200 billion.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. Now, some people say that, well, maybe liquid water actually flows on the surface of Mars. We've seen tantalizing photographs from outer space, from the orbiter, indicating that, well, perhaps there are remnants of water flows, liquid water flows on Mars. What are your thoughts? Is that putting too much into what could be an optical illusion?
I might have said that some years ago, but the evidence has just been piling up over the years. And I, across the street from where I work in astronomy, is the Planetary Science Department, and they're experts on this. And the evidence is just really compelling now. And there are actually situations, such as with the Phoenix lander near the poles, or in some of the more recent photography, that show that when the water is briny enough, when it has enough salt deposits dissolved in it, it can be liquid momentarily, even on the surface now. So there's tons of water there. In fact, if you took all the subsurface ice, water ice, not carbon dioxide ice, and melted it, it would cover Mars with about 5 centimeters of water, the whole planet. So there's actually quite a lot of water there if you could just liberate it.
Now, some diehards still insist that microbial life could live on Mars. They say that, well, look at the polar ice caps. We have yet to explore the polar ice caps. Or what about underground, into the permafrost? Perhaps there could be hot springs, volcanically heated water streams underneath the ground. So what are your thoughts to the holdouts who still think there could be microbial life on Mars, except in more exotic locations?
Oh, I think they have a good argument, and the argument is based on life on Earth. So the extremophiles, as they're called, the microbes that sort of push the physical envelope of life on the Earth, are amazing. They live inside rock with no available sunlight. They live in pHs all the way from battery acid to drain cleaning fluid. They live at high pressure and low pressure, above the boiling point of water and below the freezing point. Incredible diversity of microbes on the Earth. And that diversity includes environments that we know exist on Mars, maybe not far under the surface, maybe 5-10 meters under the surface in an aquifer.
Okay, now let me ask you the big question that the cynics would ask, and that is, well, why go to Mars? To put a pound of anything on Mars is on the neighborhood of about $1 million just to put a pound of anything on Mars. To put a human on Mars is perhaps your weight in diamonds. So what do we get out of it? We don't get weather satellites. We don't get internet reception. What do we get by going to Mars? Can we mine Mars? Is there an economic payoff? That's what I'm asking.
I would, just to be honest, I'd say no. I'd say the Martian exploration is a visionary agenda that's designed to sort of plant our flag, not any country's flag, hopefully the world's flag, on another world and say, we can explore the solar system. And this is how we would make a base of operations, and this is how we would do it. And we could live independent of the Earth. So, the long-term visionary aspect of this is that when an off-Earth colony exists, the first one.
Okay, Professor Impey, we have to take a short commercial break, but after the break, we're going to leave Mars and go to the solar system. What about the moons of Jupiter and Saturn? What about the asteroid belt? Can one day we mine the asteroid belt? Once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Just leave your name, call letters of the radio station you're listening to, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. And our special guest today, Professor Chris Impey, author of an exciting new book, Beyond Our Future in Space. Stay tuned for Science Fantastic. with Professor Michio Kaku. Today we're talking about exploring the universe with astronomer Professor Chris Impey of the University of Arizona in Tucson, author of the books How It Began, How It Ends. His latest book is called Beyond Our Future in Space. And also you may want to go to my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org. It gives you my tour schedule where I'll be signing books on a book tour. My latest book is called The Future of the Mind, How Physics is Beginning to Unravel the Secrets of the Living Brain. Telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, sending memories. Believe it or not, we can do all of the above complements of modern physics. And the book hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list 2 years ago, and it's now in paperback form. Once again, the book is called The Future of the Mind. Okay, Chris, let's just jump right into where we left off. We were talking about why we should go into outer space when it's very expensive. I interviewed Carl Sagan before he passed away years ago, and Professor Sagan said that we should go into outer space to become a two-planet species. It's simply too dangerous to put all our marbles on one planet. We need a spare planet. We need an insurance policy because it's dangerous out there. Meteors, comets, ice ages, you name it. The universe is a dangerous place. So what are your thoughts about whether or not we should become at least a two-planet species?
I take his point, and but I would actually put it a little more positively than just hedging our bets against catastrophe. I mean, I think the explorer gene that we have, or our innate curiosity, will lead some of us to move off Earth. It'll never be more than a tiny number of people, so it's not like we can escape anywhere. But that group of voyagers will form the nucleus of a different species, because after some hundreds of generations, that small gene pool will diverge from the root of the evolutionary tree of humans and become a new species, and that will be an amazing experiment, something that we've never done before in our entire history.
Okay, well, we've talked about Mars. Now let's go beyond Mars. First of all, Venus, people say, is a hellhole. It's not a tropical place at all. Very hot on Venus. But what about the outer planets? Jupiter, Saturn. Most people think they're too cold to harbor life. But now we think that perhaps Europa, Enceladus, moons of Saturn and Jupiter may have liquid oceans. So could you elaborate on how is it possible to have liquid water that far out from the sun circulating around Jupiter and Saturn?
Right. It's an important insight from planetary science in the last few decades. I mean, the old idea was the habitable zone, the sort of Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold place where water can be liquid on the surface of a planet, and the Earth is the only planet that fits that bill. But if you extend the idea of habitability to include subsurface regimes where water can be kept liquid by geological heating from below or by pressure of rock above it, then you actually end up with about 10 or 12 moons in the outer solar system, of moons of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, that could have liquid water on them or under them. And if they can have liquid water and they have energy and they have carbon-rich materials, they could have microbial life, any of them.
Another set of billionaires, this time from Google and Microsoft, about 2-3 years ago, announced an initiative to mine the asteroid belt. Now, some people thought they were lunatics. However, these are reputable billionaires, and they say that there could be all sorts of platinum-based rare metals waiting for exploitation for anyone brave enough to begin the process of mining the asteroid belt. What are your thoughts about that?
Right. On the face of it, it does sound crazy, but it's actually completely doable. And it's not as expensive as some of the things we've been talking about, like setting up a Mars base. It's cheaper than that. Basically, if you had a 500-meter near-Earth asteroid, so an asteroid that does come fairly near to the Earth, you just use the same technologies we've already demonstrated to land on comets, rendezvous with comets, and maybe attach rockets so you can steer the asteroid, and you bring it into an Earth-Moon captured orbit. And then at your leisure, you just start mining it and bringing the minerals down. And a 500-meter sized asteroid has about $2 trillion worth of platinum group metals and probably about the same value of rare earths. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of resources. So clearly it's going to attract some attention from billionaires.
Okay, well, let's take another short commercial break. And after the break, we're going to continue a discussion of, well, colonizing the universe. What would it take to colonize the solar system and even beyond? With us today is Professor Chris Impey, a professor of astronomy at the University of Arizona, author of a number of great books, including How It Began, How It Ends. His latest book is called Beyond, Our Future in Space. And if you want to be on Science Fantastic, give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129, 24/7. You can leave your name, call letters of the radio station you're listening to, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic.
For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Do you worry a lot? If you're forgetful, nervous, moody, or overwhelmed, chances are you're not protecting yourself from the ravaging effects of stress and anxiety. No matter the cause, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, your quality of life, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in as little as 1 to 2 weeks and increase your ability to recall facts, names, and numbers in 4 to 12 weeks. Calm and Clever was created by scientist Kurt Hendricks, a principal investigator in 2 NIH-funded studies on Alzheimer's disease. Try Calm and Clever for 2 months. You'll feel the difference. Call 1-800-758-8746 or go to calmandclever.com.
Hello, I'm Roy Masters. In spite of the fact I dislike asking for financial support for my listeners, I realize the consequence of failing to do so. I will have denied my listeners the second chance to express the grace of paying forward the benefits they receive through my radio program and the Foundation of Human Understanding, the organization I founded over 50 years ago. Your support will make a vital difference with the pledge as little as 63 cents a day throughout this year. Consider a donation of $19.95 per month or whatever you can afford and help me help others, especially our returning heroes. So for the sake of the military and millions of broken lives, if you haven't done so already, pay it forward, the benefits which you've received throughout the years from one crying in the wilderness. Go to FHU.com/donate, FHU.com/donate. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Why do we have all the fun? Why don't you have some of the fun by getting to the telephones and calling 866-323-2129. With us once again is Professor Chris Impey, professor of astronomy at the University of Arizona in Tucson, author of a new book, Beyond, Our Future in Space. Well, we've talked about Mars. We talked about the asteroid belt and some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Now let's go to the stars. It's a huge jump to make from our little inky-dink solar system all the way way to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star system. But, well, Stephen Hawking and a number of billionaires are now entertaining the idea that perhaps solar cells driven by laser beams can push tiny little parachutes to the stars. The starship would be the size of a postage stamp, so forget about Captain Kirk and the Enterprise. So first of all, what are your thoughts about starships? Is that really just science fiction, or is there any physical basis to going to the stars?
Well, I think, the only way it can happen is this way with a miniaturized situation. So as you know, the laws of physics are pretty implacable, and if you want to get to a few percent of the speed of light, it takes an enormous energy, unless your payload is really tiny. So they're talking about basically a gram for the payload for the spaceship with a meter-sized solar sail attached to it. And that's, on the edge of doability. They list something like 26 really big technical challenges on their website that they have to overcome to do this project. But I applaud their vision.
And, of course, it's going to take a lot of money. The energy necessary to drive this system is 100 gigawatts of laser power. That's the equivalent of 100 nuclear power plants. Driving this gigantic set of laser beams that has to be aimed very precisely to give these parachute-sized starships a boost. But like you said, hey, it's within the laws of physics, right? Well, speaking about the laws of physics, do you have any other designs for an Enterprise, Star Trek type starships, antimatter engines or nuclear bombs or Orion type aircraft, spacecraft? What are your thoughts about a starship that could send humans and not postage stamps to the nearby stars? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to take new technologies. As you know, everything we've talked about so far in the space program is still using chemical energy, and nuclear energy is hundreds of thousands of times more efficient. So we have to go to that kind of propulsion. And there have been designs, like Project Daedalus from 60 years ago. So there are designs, and just the engineering hasn't been done yet. But even so, it's a huge challenge. The amount of fuel needed is high. So I think you have to sort of harvest the fuel as you go along. The best designs I've seen involve taking the very thin amount of hydrogen that's available in interstellar space and using that as your fuel so you don't have to bring it with you.
Let's talk about starships and maybe even beyond. Let's talk about the Enterprise and warp drive. Is that really a possibility? So now I want to talk to you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a new board game you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play this game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There are hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the Beginning is available now, only at Target stores. Just look for the big dinosaur on the box in the game section. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. You'll find it all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning. Once again, you're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. And our special guest today is all the way in Rome. Professor Chris MP of the University of Arizona at Tucson, author of the book Beyond, Our Future in Space. Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. In this hour, we're talking to Professor Chris MP of the University of Arizona, author of an exciting new book called Beyond, Our Future in Space. And if you watch the movie Interstellar, realized that the people backing that film were physicists at Caltech and other great universities, using powerful computers to simulate what it would like to go through a wormhole. And if you watch the end of that movie, they actually wind up on what I do for a living. What I do for a living is I work on something called string theory. String theory talks about wormholes not just in 4 dimensions, but in 11-dimensional hyperspace. And there is Matthew McConaughey at the end of the movie floating in 5-dimensional hyperspace. And they have a bunch of equations that filter on the screen. I looked at the equations, and yes, some of the equations were actually correct. They were string equations. But, of course, that's science fiction. String theory is not developed enough to answer the question as to whether or not we can create a wormhole. But we have with us on the line Professor Chris MP, author of the book Beyond Our Future in Space. So what are your thoughts? It's a long shot, but what are your thoughts that if we really wanted to get to the stars the way they do it in movies like Interstellar and Star Trek, you have to have a wormhole machine. What are your thoughts?
So, yeah, that involves technologies that we don't know how to develop yet. But I would mention something that I think we could do right now that would get us to the stars. It's maybe not as glamorous as a wormhole and warp drive. The technology we need is the technology of suspended animation, which will evolve in natural ways out of just medical science, because people are researching what happens when we die or we nearly die. And there have been experiments to replace body fluids of pigs and dogs, which are human analogs among the mammals. And basically, if we can take ourselves down into a wait state, which is really in the realm of possibility, then that's how people will get to the stars. Of course, they'd lose all connection to the people they left behind, because they'd just be going into the deep freeze or a wait state and wake up to their new future. But that's something that we think we can do without any new technologies or worrying about the laws of physics.
Now, of course, frogs and certain fish can be frozen solid in a lake during wintertime, and when they thaw out, they're perfectly fine, even though they underwent suspended animation. But that's because they use antifreeze. Frogs and fish will use glucose as an antifreeze to change the freezing point of water, but antifreeze on that level will kill a human being. So what are your thoughts about freezing the body, the formation of ice crystals, and the use of antifreeze, which is often lethal to the human body if we try to use antifreeze to change the freezing point of water? So what are your thoughts? Is it a technology that's around the corner, or we still have a few decades more to work on?
I think there's experimentation that's going to get us there. The fluids that people are using with pigs and dogs that take them down essentially into a wait state for days or even weeks and then bring them back mostly successfully involve glycol or some composite that involves glycol. We could also learn some tricks from other creatures, the tardigrade, so-called water bear, these tiny little creatures that are about 1/10 of a millimeter. They've developed the trick of cryptohydrosis, or taking themselves down to 1% of their normal water concentration, and they seem to be able to survive for centuries that way. So, nature has done this with smaller creatures than us, and NASA's studied tardigrades, actually, to see what their trick is. So I think that research is probably going to lead to something interesting.
Okay, and now let's say a few words about what we expect to meet if we meet an advanced civilization in outer space, something straight out of Hollywood. Astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev of the former Soviet Union had a scale, type 1, type 2, type 3, of advanced civilizations, perhaps thousands of years more advanced than us, based on energy consumption. So could you summarize a little bit about what we might expect to find once we do reach the stars and perhaps make contact with an extraterrestrial civilization that's more advanced than ours?
Right, and in this Kardashev scale, where 1 is controlling your energy of your star, we're not even a 1. We're like a fraction of 1, because we barely use 1 part in a billion of solar energy. So we're barely on the scale. The extreme of his scale, of course, is our creatures that control the energy or the resources of an entire galaxy. And my gut tells me that anything that much more advanced than us is essentially going to be unrecognizable. I think, much as I love the science fiction and I read it and I look at the movies and the TV shows, it's incredibly anthropocentric. It's really reflecting us more than anything else. And I think life is going to be pretty strange, especially when it's more advanced. And so I think it may be unrecognizable. I think it's not going to be like us at all.
And then the $64,000 question. How come they don't land on the White House lawn and advertise their existence and say, here we are, folks? What are your thoughts? Everyone has their own ideas about this.
Right. And Fermi, of course, asked this in 1950. Where are they? Making the calculation that there's got to be a lot of life out there, and we're unlikely to be the first intelligent technological species. And I agree with that argument. I think space is big, so one part of the answer may just be that intelligent life is very thinly sprinkled through the galaxy, and we already know how hard it is to visit the stars, so you have to be pretty advanced to even be doing that kind of thing. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it just may be that they're not inclined to be interested in us. Apathy is maybe not a good answer. It's not the kind of thing we want to hear, but we may have nothing to teach someone that's that much more advanced than us, so they may be disinterested in us.
Yeah, I lean toward that in the sense that when you walk in a forest and you see an anthill, do we go down to the ants and say, I bring you trinkets, I bring you beads, I give you nuclear energy, take me to your ant queen, or do we step on a few of them? Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Once again, our special guest today is Professor Chris MP, author of the book Beyond, Our Future in Space. Chris, thank you so much for being on Science Fantastic.
Thanks, I've enjoyed it a lot.
Okay, and once again, he's also the author of a number of previous books, including How It Began and How It Ends. Once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. You can always give us a call 24/7, anytime, day or night, by calling 866-323-2129. All we ask is you leave your name, telephone number, the call letters to the radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Good day.
Black holes, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, a professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of string field theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And in this hour, once again, we're going to throw the lines open because this hour is your hour. This is the time when you can ask that question, make that comment that you've always been wanting to ask but never had the courage. Well, you can give us a call at the following number, 866-323-2129. And perhaps your thoughts will be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So write that number down, 866-323-2129. That number is available 24/7, anytime, day or night. Call that number. You'll get a recording. Simply record your name, call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So let's say it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden you get that brainstorm of a lifetime, and you're just dying to talk to somebody about it, but hey, it's just you and the radio, just you and the TV set. Well, you can give me a call. You can call 866-323-2129. Or maybe you're having dinner with the kids and they ask you a homework question that leaves you stumped. What are you going to do? You're going to get to the telephones, call 866-323-2129, and why not put your kids on the radio? Why not have them ask a question or make a comment about science on over 100 radio stations that carry science? Fantastic. Okay, well, without further ado, let's move right along and take the first listener phone call.
Hi, Professor Kaku. First of all, I'd like to send a call from Jackson, Mississippi. I'm not sure of the radio station. And second, I would love to say that I love watching you on the universe. I watch you on your channel all the time. But my question is, what do you actually believe gravity is? I know it's a complicated question. I know we still ain't figured it out, but I'd just like to hear what you have to say about it. Thanks.
Well, you asked one of the most difficult questions in the universe, and that is, what is gravity? Ironically, it was gravity that was the first force to be more or less described mathematically by Isaac Newton back in the 1600s. But there was a problem with Newton's equations. When you write down Newton's equations, you realize that gravity spreads infinitely fast throughout the universe. So if the sun were to disappear right now, if the sun were to disappear, it would affect the Earth immediately. We would be hurled into outer space instantly. Well, there's a defect there, and the defect is that there's no mention of the speed of light. We see no deviation from Einstein's theory in the laboratory, and Einstein says nothing can go faster than the speed of light. Even gravity cannot go faster than the speed of light. So Einstein had to introduce a new picture. He replaced this idea of an instantaneous force that could spread instantly throughout the universe, and we replaced it with a fabric, so that if the sun were to disappear right now, the ripples of that titanic disappearance would then permeate around the universe, just like waves on a pond emanate from the place where the stone first hits the pond. Well, now we have the quantum theory, and the quantum theory says, no, this can't be right, because forces are carried by particles. And so we have to take Einstein's theory and bust it up into little particles called gravitons. Unfortunately, gravitons have never been seen in nature. We know they must exist. And gravitons create waves. Now, we've seen those waves. These waves are called gravity waves, and they were seen just a few months ago, making headlines around the world. But these gravitons, that is the origin of these waves, little particles of gravity, have not yet been seen in the laboratory. And it may take many decades before we have instruments sensitive enough to pick up gravity waves. Now, why is that important? Because that would give us a unified field theory of everything. So the short answer to your question is, we don't really know. However, the leading theory is that these gravitons are actually tiny little vibrating strings. So think of a rubber band. A rubber band vibrates, creates all the particles of the known universe, but from a distance, the rubber band looks like a dot. That is a graviton. And that's how we introduced the quantum theory into Einstein's theory, by introducing little loops of gravity, little strings like rubber bands. And these rubber bands can vibrate at different frequencies, giving us all the material particles of the universe. Now, you may say to yourself, well, if that's the latest picture of gravity, then how come we don't win the Nobel Prize for this idea? Well, there's a catch. And the catch is that these strings cannot vibrate in ordinary 4 dimensions. They have to vibrate in 11-dimensional hyperspace. At that point, even physicists begin to roll their eyes into the heavens and say, what the hell did you just say? Well, that's what one of the predictions of string theory is, that these strings are in some sense magical. They cannot just vibrate in ordinary 4 dimensions, the dimension of Einstein, but 11-dimensional hyperspace. Now, we've seen no evidence of 11-dimensional hyperspace. However, we're looking at atom smashers around the world, especially the CERN atom smasher outside Geneva, Switzerland. We're beginning to conduct some of the first experiments looking for the presence of higher dimensions. And if these higher dimensions exist, then can parallel worlds also exist? In other words, parallel universes. They're not so far-fetched anymore. We think that perhaps in our universe, the speed of light is a constant, and we sort of know that the universe is expanding. But what about these other universes? Well, to find out more about these other universes, you may want to get a copy of my earlier book called Parallel Worlds, where I talk about the latest understanding of what is gravity. So such a simple question, why do things fall down? Such a simple question takes us into the realm of higher dimensions, parallel universe, and God knows what else. Okay, well, moving right along, let's move on and take the next listener phone call.
Hello, this is Gary in Great Falls, Montana. I think that zero gravity is easy to understand if you think about it as the center of everything. Zero gravity is in the center of our planet, and zero gravity is in the center of the sun. And that's what holds the solar system together, and that's why we don't want to see zero gravity in our planet, because I would imagine that temperature at zero gravity isn't too fun to be in at the center of our planet either. Anyway. I always was a simple-minded person, but that's kind of a simple idea for zero gravity. Anyway, thanks.
Well, you ask a very interesting question that even Isaac Newton asked himself 300 years ago, and that is, what is the gravity at the center of the Earth? Well, you see, at the center of the Earth, there's no direction because, of course, the Earth is a sphere, perfect sphere, let's say. There's no left, right, up, down, whatever. So at the center of the Earth, said Isaac Newton, gravity must be zero. Zero because of symmetry. Nothing else. At the center of the sun, gravity must be zero. At the center of the earth, gravity must be zero. But you see, that doesn't explain what happens away from the center, where of course most of the action takes place. We want to know what the gravity is at the earth, at Jupiter, at the different planets. And just to say that gravity is zero at the center of the Earth doesn't explain what happens off-center. And that's where Isaac Newton's equations for gravity come in. Isaac Newton said that the gravitational force goes as 1 over r squared. So the farther you are from the center of the Earth, the weaker gravity gets, except at the very center of the Earth, where, as I mentioned, all the forces cancel out and there is zero gravity. So in other words, we need a theory not just at zero gravity, we need a theory at non-zero gravity, and that's where Isaac Newton's equations come in. And then even those equations have to be modified because they don't include the speed of light. Then we have to go to Einstein's theory. And even those theories have to be modified because they don't include Planck's constant, the constant that measures the strength of quantum forces. So you see that asking a very simple question about zero gravity immediately starts to put you into the realm of the universe itself. And again, if you want to know more about these things, get a copy of my book, Hyperspace, which is one of the first popular books ever written on string theory, or my other book, Parallel Worlds, which talks in detail about other universes. Okay, let's take a short commercial break. And after the break, let's continue with our dialogue. If you want to get on Science Fantastic, why don't you give us a call? The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Give us a call, leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So give us a call. Be part of the fun. Give us a call and have your thoughts heard on National Radio.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Hi folks. In a world of GMO, genetically modified organisms that is, chemicals, processed foods, and a healthcare system that's unraveling like a cheap suit, it's time to prepare. God created herbs, and herbs help man. Our body can heal itself, just sometimes we need assistance. You need some help? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Our mild detox is quite powerful with its unique blend of 8 different herbs. And if you're looking for more, our non-GMO supplements will help you with different needs you might have. Health should be a top priority. Take care of your health naturally. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Give your body a treat. Let the herbs do their thing naturally. Read all the testimonies on the website, GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Sickness and viruses are like intruders, and herbs are like warriors. Let the tea work for you. GetTheTea.com.
I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the beginning, is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the beginning.
I'm Jim LeBlanc with Volunteers of America. When it comes to advertising, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Mark Jones with SunPro Solar. If you're not getting a significant return on your advertising investment, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Blair Cottingham with United Rentals. If you're not happy with the results of your advertising, you gotta call Dan.
Generally, we work with 2 types of clients. Those who advertise and are worried about their return on investment are those who are frustrated about not getting a better return on investment. You probably don't fall into either of these categories, but if you do, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
Here is Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. The lines are open. This means that this is your hour. This is the time when you can get to the phones and call 866-323-2129. Leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from. And perhaps your thoughts can be heard on national radio. And just remember, no question is, quote, too dumb or too stupid to put on national radio, because chances are, if you have a question, chances are that hundreds of other people have that identical same question. And just remember, sometimes the simplest, dumbest questions are the most profound questions of all. When Einstein was 16 years old, get this, when he was 16 years old, he asked himself a simple question which changed world history. It changed the course of World War II, changed the course of the Cold War, changed everything about what we know about the universe. The question asked by the 16-year-old child was, can you outrace a light beam? Such a simple question. The answer to that question, by the way, is no, because you can't go faster than the speed of light. But when Einstein understood this question and the answer to the question, he changed world history. Because what comes out of this equation is the atomic bomb, the sun, the stars, the Milky Way galaxy. This equation of Einstein equals mc squared lights up the universe. And it all came from a question asked by a 16-year-old child. Okay, well, moving right along. Once again, if you want to get on Science Fantastic, give us a call and be part of the fun. The number to call is 866-323-2129. Okay, once again, moving right along now, let's take the next listener phone call.
Who were the three greatest women of science, and what were their theories?
Well, you ask an interesting question because there's so many to choose from. The first on the list would, of course, be Madame Curie. Madame Curie won 2 Nobel Prizes, not just one in physics, one in chemistry. And she helped to open up the whole realm of radioactivity. Radium, for example, is one of the elements discovered by her. Polonium is another. Curium, another element, was named after her. And so she ranks up there in terms of our understanding of the nuclear force. And there's so many other scientists who are perhaps less well known, but made a significant impact on the history of science. For example, Sophie Germain. Sophie Germain lived in France at the time of the French Revolution in the 1700s, a very dangerous time to live there. But she was very much enamored of science, and especially mathematics, but she was a woman and couldn't get published or even interact with other male mathematicians. So what she did was she impersonated a male. She took on a man's name, wrote letters to all the great mathematicians of the age, and they corresponded with her because they realized, oh my God, we have a prodigy here. And only later did they find out, oops, she's a woman. And when they did find out, well, there were some people who wouldn't invite her to different award ceremony. In fact, in one ceremony, she was given an award, but she couldn't even come to receive the award because women were not allowed at that ceremony. And also another woman who suffered from discrimination was Vera Rubin. Some people think that she is up for a Nobel Prize because she was one of the first people to alert us to the existence of dark matter. It turns out that the Milky Way galaxy spins too fast for its own good. Believe it or not, the Milky Way galaxy spins so fast it should fly apart, but there it is, stable for billions of years. So here we have this gigantic spiral in outer space. You see it every night when you look in the night sky, this huge disk. But what holds this disk together? Something alien, something new called dark matter. So many people think that Vera Rubin will possibly win the Nobel Prize for pointing the direction to what is called dark matter, which we now know is 10 times more plentiful than ordinary matter.
So now I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a new board game you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play this game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. Now, to eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their own species. There are hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution in the Beginning is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution in the Beginning is available now, only at Target stores. Just look for the big dinosaur on the box. In the game section, it's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. You'll find it all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Okay, well, let's move right along and take the next listener phone call.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mark Robertson, WNDB 1150, Daytona Beach. And my question is, when I was little, I had fillings, and I could have sworn I picked up a radio station with my fillings. I just want to know if that's possible. Thank you.
Well, not only is it possible, but this has been going on for many a decade. When radio was first introduced on a widespread scale back in the 1930s, people began to say that I think I can hear the radio in my teeth. And here's how it works. First of all, how is radio created? Radio is created by having electricity go up and down an antenna or a piece of metal. And so the very fact that you can have electricity go up and down a piece of metal emits waves, and these waves are radio waves. Now you can run the videotape backwards, and that is if you have a piece of metal in the presence of radio, it'll also pick up that radiation. And if it's in your teeth, it'll actually create vibrations. And these vibrations can be felt because, of course, it's in your mouth. And that's where radio waves can be picked up in your fillings. Okay, and when you're in school, of course, we can do that with crystal sets, but you can also do that with your teeth. Okay, well, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. It's open mic, so give us a call at 866-323-2129 and have your question heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So, give us a call.
Try to stump him. But be warned, Professor Kaku is really smart. Like, whoa, this guy's smart. You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku, and this hour, once again, we're throwing the lines open, and this is where the fun begins. This is where you can be part of the program. So instead of simply sitting there listening to the radio, wondering what's really happening in the world, why not be part of what's happening in the world by giving us a call? The hotline number is right open 24/7, anytime, day or night. You're not going to get a busy signal. Give us a call at 866-323-2129. And when the recording comes on, all we ask is that you leave your name, the call letters of your radio station, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps your thoughts can be heard on national radio. So once again, 866-323-2129 is the number to call. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
Yeah, listening from Northeast Pennsylvania, WILK, and the sun will interest me the most. How it keeps, where the energy comes from, how it keeps shining, the diameter, and if it shines on the backside also. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, well, you ask a question that has fascinated the ancients ever since we looked at the night sky. Well, of course, when ancient humans began to domesticate fire, they thought, aha, maybe the sun is nothing but fire in the sky. So that was the first great theory that actually made some sense. But in the 1800s, scientists began to realize that, well, fire requires oxygen. You can calculate the amount of oxygen required to set the sun on fire. And when the calculation was done, they realized, oh my God. It turns out that the sun would have burnt out thousands of years ago. And there's no way that the sun could shine for millions to billions of years. And so we had a problem. And the problem is, what lights up the night sky? A new kind of force, a force beyond simply fire. And then along comes Einstein in 1905, who says, I think I have it. And that is E equals mc squared, meaning that even a small amount of m can create a large amount of E. A small amount of matter in the form of hydrogen can create enormous amounts of E in the form of sunlight. Then in the 1930s, Hans Bethe, who would win the Nobel Prize for this, sat down and worked out all the steps by which hydrogen fuses to create helium and basically creates all the known elements inside the sun. And so the sun is basically an oven that cooks hydrogen to create helium, then cooks helium to create lithium, and on up the periodic chart. And so we now had a mechanism by which we can calculate the amount of energy created by the sun, and it worked out perfectly. So we now realize that the sun is a hydrogen bomb, a gigantic hydrogen bomb. It doesn't blow apart completely because gravity holds it together. So the sun is, in some sense, a stable object because gravity wants to compress the sun, but the nuclear force wants to blow the sun apart. And the two forces just match each other, and so we get equilibrium, and that's why the sun is stable, giving us sunlight. It is spherical because gravity attracts spherically. Gravity attracts evenly. That's why the sun is round, for example. And it releases energy via Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. In fact, when I was a grad student years ago at the University of California at Berkeley getting my PhD, my roommate was an astronomy grad student. And in the morning, he would make some wisecracks, and he would say, I'm going to cook a star today. I'm going to put a star in the oven. And when he came home at night, he said, well, I just took the star out of the oven. Well, I thought my roommate was nuts. I mean, how can you put a star in the oven? And then I asked him one day, and he explained to me. We know so much about the equations for sun that we can put the equations in the morning into the computer, and by night we can have a mature star. We can actually cook a star in the memory of a computer. Okay, well, let's take a short commercial break, and after the break we're going to continue our discussion with Open Mike on Science Fantastic. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Be part of the fun. Just don't sit there listening to the radio. Get to the phones and give us a call at 866-323-2129 and have your thoughts heard on National Radio.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Do you worry a lot? Whether you're a college student, busy professional, parent, or grandparent, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in 1 to 2 weeks. Call 1-800-758-8746 or calmandclever.com.
If you have sciatica, then you know all about the crippling pain that travels from your lower back down your leg when a spasm occurs. It's brutal. In fact, it's enough to take your breath away. Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream helps relieve persistent, shooting pains associated with the sciatic nerve in the lower back and legs. This natural, homeopathic cream contains the most potent ingredients to soothe even the most excruciating pain associated with sciatica. Stop the pain now. Ask for Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream at your local health food store or go online to trasknutrition.com.
As a business owner, or CEO for that matter, are you frustrated with the money you're wasting on advertising? How do I know it's being wasted? Because you see your advertising as an expense. I started my company because I was tired of seeing passionate business owners waste advertising dollars. So what if I could show you how to make your advertising a profit center in 30 days, guaranteed? I know what you're thinking. That's bull. Then challenge me. At no cost to you, I'll show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. If this is important to you, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
Here is Professor Michio Kaku.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. It's open mic in this hour, meaning that you can get to the telephone and give us a call at 866-323-2129. And why don't you become part of the fun? Instead of just listening to the radio, why not be part of the radio by giving us a call at 866-323-2129. Let's say you're just walking down the street and wondering, what does it all mean? Where does everything come from? The mountains, the sky, the oceans. Where did life come from? What about what's out there in outer space? Is there life out there in the universe? These questions are all fair game on Science Fantastic. All you have to do is to get to the phone and give us a call at 866-323-2129. Leave your name, the call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on Science Fantastic. So give us a call. And also check out my website. My website is mkaku.org, mkaku.org. We have over almost 3 million people following us on Facebook, 300,000 people following us on Twitter. And maybe you'll be there at my next book signing. My latest book is called The Future of the Mind. Telepathy, telekinesis, mind reading, recording memories. All the stuff you see in the movies, now we can do it in the laboratory. So find out about this by getting a copy of my latest book, The Future of the Mind. Okay, well, moving right along now, let's take the next listener phone call.
Hi, my name is Frank, W-I-L-K, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. My question is that when do you anticipate when NASA would be able to put a spacecraft into space where there won't be no booster rockets, there'll just be one spacecraft itself, land like on, they say, the moon, and return to Earth, and without no extra booster rockets or just one spacecraft? Thank you very much. Have a good day. Your show is the best. Thank you.
Well, you ask an embarrassing question because scientists for the last century or so have been using chemical rockets to go into outer space. So in other words, we have to carry our fuel with us, which is, if you think about it, a waste of fuel, because the fuel has to have enough fuel to carry itself into outer space. And if you think about it, most of the rocket's weight is fuel. Therefore, if you could jettison the empty canisters, you could save on the cost of the rocket, and that's why we have booster rockets. So the booster rocket would be the first stage of our rocket ship, and the last stages would be the actual payload. That's been the way it's been with rocketry for almost 100 years. But NASA is slowly catching up to the idea that maybe we should have another kind of rocket without having to use these booster rockets. However, here's where it gets rather iffy. because these alternative to chemical rockets are not as efficient as chemical rockets, but let's review some of them. One of them is the plasma ion rocket. Instead of shooting out chemicals, it shoots out ions. That's great, but the amount of ions that you can send out is very, very thin. So we don't expect to have them anytime soon. And then we have laser rockets, and I'll say a few things about laser rockets after the break. Laser rockets have no booster rockets at all. So once again, you've been listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. And after the break, we'll talk about the next generation of rockets beyond the chemical rockets. Give us a call at 866-323-2129 is the number to call.
This is Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, we're going to throw the lines open because this hour is your hour. This is the time when you can get to the phones and call the magic number, 866-323-2129. And perhaps your thoughts will be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Well, before the break, we had a simple question, and that is, what will replace the booster rocket? Well, it's not such an easy question because we've been wedded to chemical rockets for almost 100 years. We're playing with other kinds of rockets, like, for example, the plasma ion engine. The plasma ion engine shoots out ions instead of hot chemicals. In principle, they can operate for years at a time instead of just a few minutes, which is the case for ordinary booster rockets. The catch there is that ion engines produce very small amounts of thrust. For long periods of time, of course, like for years in principle, but the total amount of thrust is quite small. And therefore, you don't get the blast of energy that you get with an ordinary chemical rocket. The next generation of rockets, perhaps beyond ion engine, is laser-fired engine. We get a sail made out of, let's say, some kind of reinforced tinfoil, and we shoot a laser beam on the foil. The foil acts like a parachute. By blasting the tinfoil with enough light energy, it'll propel it. In fact, Stephen Hawking was at a press conference just last month where he talked about sending a starship that would go not just around the Earth, but to the stars, propelled by gigantic banks of laser beams fired at a parachute containing a small payload, a small little chip, which would then go to the stars and take photographs and things like that. Well, that sounds like a great idea, right? But what's the catch? There's always a catch someplace. And the catch there is that the laser beam has to be enormous in terms of energy, 100 megawatts. 100 gigawatts of energy. That's the equivalent of 100 nuclear power plants. So think of having an array of 100 nuclear power plants blasting its energy into outer space, inflating a parachute that then hurls a small payload, a small chip, near the speed of light to a distant star. And so you can see immediately that, well, it sounds like a great idea, right? Rockets without booster rockets, but the practical details of that are pretty daunting. And we don't expect plasma rockets to go into regular use for a few more decades. And perhaps by the end of the century, we'll have enough resources to send laser payloads into outer space. Okay, well, let's move on to the next listener phone call.
Hello, my name is Peter, and given that you wrote a book about neurology, basically, I was wondering about the future of the mind and an extension of the work of Jose Delgado, who claimed in a CNN report back in the 80s, I believe it was, that he was able to affect the thought processes of monkeys with radio frequencies. There's been a lot of talk about that now. So that's what I'd like to talk about. So my name is Pete. Bye.
Well, you ask an interesting question because, yes, back in the, as far back as the 60s, scientists were experimenting with monkeys, not using radio, but actually using wires to connect them to mechanical devices. In one situation, which was photographed and recorded, a bull had electrodes placed in his brain, and then it was, in fact, connected with radio to a switch. And in one famous experiment, a Yale professor puts on the uniform of a matador and goes into the bull ring with a live bull. As the live bull starts to get aggravated and lunges at the Yale professor takes out a button, pushes the button, and stops the bull dead in its tracks. An incredible feat. But certainly possible because now we know the basic outlines of the brain. We know, for example, where in the brain you have to electrify in order to get the bull to stop. In fact, we have maps of the brain now, maps of the brain where we know that this part of the brain connects to your left hand, that part of the brain connects to your right hand, and by putting electricity in these spots, you can actually make your left hand and right hand move. In fact, the military is now backing this. We're not just talking about scientists at Yale University, but $150 million has been allocated by the United States Pentagon to create an Iron Man outfit. An Iron Man outfit controlled electronically by chips in the human brain that then allow the brain to control an exoskeleton so that paralyzed people can now walk again. And that's just one of several experiments that I mentioned in my book, The Future of the Mind. So Iron Man is not so far-fetched. And then if you connect the mind, the hippocampus of the brain, to the internet, you can actually send memories. Memories can be sent electronically. Here's how you do it. You put 2 electrons on either side of the hippocampus located at the center of the brain, and then you train a mouse, for example, to perform a task. You record the signals that go across that part of the brain, the hippocampus. You record it like a tape recorder. Later, you play it back. You play the same impulses back into the brain of the mouse, and bingo, the mouse executes that very same feat. Well, these and many other incredible discoveries are mentioned in my book, The Future of the Mind. So once again, go to my website, mkaku.org, where perhaps one day I'll be signing your copy of The Future of the Mind. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Once again, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Give us a call. The hotline number is 866-323-2129. Once again, leave your name, the call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from. And perhaps your thoughts will be heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. So once again, stay tuned every week on Science Fantastic as we explore the cutting edge of science. Good day.
Black holes, the cosmos, space, and time travel, medicine, robotics, science, and technology. Professor Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, graduated from Harvard University summa cum laude and first in his physics class. Received his PhD in physics from the University of California at Berkeley. And now, a professor of physics at City University of New York for 30 years. His goal? To complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, to derive an equation, to summarize all the physical laws of the universe. The co-founder of Stringfield Theory, author of the international bestsellers Hyperspace, Visions, and Parallel Worlds, and voted as one of the 100 smartest people in New York, profiling the latest cutting-edge developments in science, which revolutionize our world and touch our lives. Now, Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. On Science Fantastic, we profile the amazing, jaw-dropping scientific discoveries which are revolutionizing our world and touching our lives. And in this hour, once again, we're going to throw the lines open because this hour is your hour. This is the time when you can have fun, when you can give us a call and ask any question, make any comment about science. That's right. Write this number down. You can always give us a call 24/7, anytime, day or night, at 866-323-2129. Once again, that's 866-323-2129. Give us your name, the call letters of the radio station you're listening to, and the city you're calling from, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. And before we take the first listener phone call, let me remind you once again that I'm always on tour. Go to my website, mkaku.org, mkaku.org. It gives you my book tour schedule, and perhaps I'll be signing your copy of my latest New York Times bestseller, The Future of the Mind, the scientific quest to understand, enhance, and empower the mind. Did you know that the United States Pentagon has spent over $150 million trying to connect the human mind to a computer and then to an exoskeleton? Because, of course, we have so many scores of wounded warriors from Iraq and Afghanistan with brain injury, but why not connect their brain directly to a mechanical exoskeleton so they can have a reasonable normal life once again, and perhaps even have superpowers? Think about that. Telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, uploading memories, all the stuff of science fiction. Did you know that we can actually do that in the laboratory today using modern physics? We're not talking science fiction here. We're talking physics. And that's why you should get a copy in paperback now of my latest book, The Future of the Mind. But once again, as I said before, this hour is your hour. This is the time when you can call 866-323-2129. Let's say you're listening to the radio, watching the TV, and something catches your fancy, something about the universe, about stars, about the space program, something about aliens from outer space, the latest advances in cancer research, and you're all alone, and there's no one to talk to, and it just dies right there. Well, why let this interesting topic of conversation die when you can give us a call and continue the conversation on national radio? That's right. You can give us a call at 866-323-2129 and have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the first listener phone call.
Hi, Michio. I want to ask you about the solar cycle, the 22-year solar cycle that we're having. We're having a weak one, so are we going into an ice age? What's the knowledgeable thinking on that? Thank you. Bye.
Okay, well, you ask a very interesting question. First of all, we do have the solar cycle. The solar cycle is every 11 years, or for one complete cycle, 22 years. And we know this because of the sunspots that go across the face of the sun. And as the sun rotates, it's sort of like winding the mainspring of an old-fashioned clock. You know, in the old days, we used to have those clocks, and you had to, like, wind up the back. And if you wound up the mainspring too tightly, it would then spring out, and you would have wires all over your house. Remember those days? Well, the same thing happens with the sun. Those field lines of the sun are like the metal windings in an old-fashioned clock. As the sun spins, it winds up the clock. And after 11 years, there's so much tension. There's so much tension in these magnetic field lines that it springs out, and the North Pole and the South Pole of the sun flip. That's right. The North Pole and the South Pole of the sun flip every 11 years, releasing a burst of radiation. And the burst of radiation we just passed, by the way, is the 11-year solar cycle. And we have to watch out because the radiation emitted from the sun could be quite fierce. We have to tell our astronauts to be on alert for a solar flare if it comes by. They have to go to a special compartment in the space station that is hardened for radiation. It also means that some of our satellites could get knocked out. And we might also have disruptions of power stations on the Earth. This has already happened. In fact, sunspots in some sense are like a rifle. Think of a rifle that shoots a bullet into space. That bullet is a gigantic ejection of solar material, and the rifle is the sunspot. And so sunspots, as they rotate across the surface of the sun, are like rifles shooting bullets at the Earth. Now, does this have anything to do with the Ice Age? Probably not. When you take a look at the Ice Ages of the past, they do not correspond to an 11-year cycle. In fact, the cycles of Ice Ages are measured on the scale of tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years. And if you then try to fit the Ice Age cycle with any of the known cycles, the only thing which seems to correlate is the Milankovitch cycle. That is, the slight precessions of the Earth's axis. So in other words, we think, though we cannot yet prove, that ice ages coincide not with the solar cycle, but with the slight wobbling of the orbit of the Earth as it goes around the sun. So if you take a look at the two curves, that is the slight precession of the Earth's axis as it goes around the sun, and the known ice ages going back hundreds of thousands of years, you find a reasonable correspondence. And that's what we think causes ice ages. Now, it turns out that we are due for another ice age in about 10,000 to 20,000 years. The last glaciation cycle ended 10,000 years ago. In fact, 10,000 years ago, we humans were very much like pack animals, like wolves in a wolf pack, scavenging for food wherever we can get it in the ice. That's the way humanity existed for most of its existence, going back to the end of the last glaciation. But then a miracle happened. The ice melted. And with the melting of the ice 10,000 years ago, agriculture got started. We domesticated animals. The first stationary cities could get off the ground because we didn't have to chase after the wandering deer and the wandering buffalo. With the coming of cities came commerce and eventually science and technology. But hey, we're headed for another ice age 10 to 20,000 years from now. And where I'm standing, we'll be under perhaps a half a mile of ice as it was 10,000 years ago.
So now I want to talk to you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a new board game you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play this game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. Evolution in the Beginning is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. There are hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution in the Beginning is available now, only at Target stores. Just look for the big dinosaur on the box in the game section. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. You'll find it all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
Yes, I wanted to know about, my question was being able to harvest energy from drains like the sink or, even from toilet drains, tub drains. To me, that's a lot of energy just going to waste. It's flowing water. Possibly we could store that energy somehow. Thanks for your time. Bye.
Well, I think you are hinting at a much larger question, and that is things rotate. Air rotates, water rotates, not just in the toilet bowl, but also in hurricanes and tornadoes. And the same physics applies for your toilet as well as a hurricane. So why not try to harness some of that energy? Well, first of all, why do we even have this rotating, swirling of atmospheric pressure and water? And the reason is something called the Coriolis effect. First of all, as far as the atmosphere is concerned, we know that hot air rises, but the Earth spins. The Earth spins slightly underneath the mass of air. In fact, where you are sitting right now, you're traveling at about 1,000 miles per hour. The circumference of the Earth is 24,000 miles. There are 24 hours in a day. You divide, and bingo, you are traveling at 1,000 miles per hour. So as hot air rises, the Earth spins beneath it, and that gives it a kick. It gives it a rotational kick, and that causes the rotation of a hurricane. And that's why hurricanes rotate counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. The next time you see the evening news and you see a hurricane in the Pacific or the Atlantic, look at the direction, and you'll see that above the equator, that hurricanes travel counterclockwise. Below the equator, they travel in the opposite direction, and that's because of the way that the Earth spins. Now, does that also apply to your toilet bowl and your kitchen sink? Well, yes and no. Let's do an experiment. Take your kitchen sink, pull the plug, and you can notice that sometimes it goes clockwise, sometimes it goes counterclockwise. In fact, if you spin the water with your finger, you can actually reverse the direction. So in other words, if you have still water, perfectly still water, and then pull the plug, it'll drain counterclockwise. But with your fingertip, you can easily counteract the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect is very small. It's very large, of course, when you're talking about the mass of a hurricane, but it's very small talking about your kitchen sink, and that's why with your finger you can actually reverse the direction of the spin. So, can you extract energy from this? Well, yes, but it's a very small amount of energy. So don't think we're going to be able to solve the energy crisis with your bathtub sink. Now, what about the energy of a hurricane? People have tried. But weather control is something that is, decades into the future. We are simply not at the point where we can manipulate the energies found in something like a hurricane. A hurricane, in turn, has the energy of several hydrogen bombs. So don't think that we can manipulate or control or extract and harness the energy of a hurricane anytime soon. Okay, well, let's take a short commercial break. Once again, this is Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Keep the calls coming, 24 hours a day, day in, day night. You can give us a call, leave your name, the call letters of the radio station, and the city you're calling from after you call 866-323-2129. Give us a call and have your thoughts heard on national radio.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
Hi, folks. In a world of GMO, genetically modified organisms, that is, chemicals, processed foods, and a healthcare system that's unraveling like a cheap suit, it's time to prepare. God created herbs, and herbs help man. Our body can heal itself, just sometimes we need assistance. You need some help? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Our mild detox is quite powerful with its unique blend of 8 different herbs. And if you're looking for more, our non-GMO supplements will help you with different needs you might have. Health should be a top priority. Take care of your health naturally. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Give your body a treat. Let the herbs do their thing naturally. Read all the testimonies on the website, GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Sickness and viruses are like intruders, and herbs are like warriors. Let the tea work for you. GetTheTea.com.
Do you worry a lot? Whether you're a college student, busy professional, parent, or grandparent, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in 1 to 2 weeks. Call 1-800-758-8746 or calmandclever.com.
Hello, here I am, Roy Masters, 55 years on talk radio and still saving lives. Please continue helping the Foundation of Human Understanding by simply donating $19.95 per month. Paying it forward plan will continue saving lives into the years to come. I'm a pioneer in helping our troops to overcome the ravages of PTSD without drugs. Go to FHU.com and then click on the donation page. That's FHU.com.
The Foundation of Human Understanding is a 501c3 church.
I'm Jim LeBlanc with Volunteers of America. When it comes to advertising, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Mark Jones with SunPro Solar. If you're not getting a significant return on your advertising investment, you gotta call Dan.
I'm Blair Cottingham with United Rentals. If you're not happy with the results of your advertising, you gotta call Dan.
Generally, we work with 2 types of clients. Those who advertise and are worried about their return on investment, or those who are frustrated about not getting a better return on investment. You probably don't fall into either of these categories, but if you do, call me. I'm Dan Glaviano.
If you spend $10,000 to $80,000 a month on advertising, Dan will show you how to make your advertising a profit center, not an expense. Dan only works with one business in any given category. Find out if your category is still available. Visit gottacalldan.com. gottacalldan.com. That's gottacalldan.com.
Listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. This hour is your hour. Why not join the fun? Why not get to the telephones and call 866-323-2129. Record your name, the call letters of the radio station you're calling from, and the city that you're calling from, and perhaps you can have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Now, some people tell me, well, maybe my question is not deep enough or profound enough for national radio. But hey, let's be frank. Chances are, if something's been bothering you, chances are it bothers a lot of other people at the same time, but maybe they're too embarrassed to admit it. Well, there's no shame in giving us a call and having your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
Hi, Michio. What do you think if they started implanting human corneas in mechanical beings and robots?
Well, people are beginning to ask a question about, well, mechanical enhancement of the body and what happens if body parts are then used for other purposes. Well, of course, we're not talking science fiction any longer. We're not talking about Frankenstein, a novel written by this teenage authoress who was immortalized by that novel. We're talking about modern science. Now, first of all, corneal transplants are commonplace. In fact, before you pass away, you can create what is called a living will so that you can voluntarily bequeath your body parts for medical purposes. However, there's no reason for using this for a mechanical device because we already have mechanical sensors, lenses, optics, far better than what Mother Nature has given us. So there's no reason to harvest the cornea for any other purpose other than to give the gift of sight to somebody whose eyesight is failing. So I should point out that there's no necessity for that because we can already create artificial lenses, artificial optics, much better than what Mother Nature has given us. I should also mention that using science, we can then begin to give the gift of sight to people who are blind. The artificial retina is being tested in LA and other universities in the United States. It's still rather primitive. You're not talking about the full color that you get in your eyesight. Your eyesight, for example, would have thousands of pixel equivalents in the retina of your eye. We're not at that point yet. However, we are at the point where hundreds of pixels are definitely possible. And it means that even though the person does not get full artificial eyesight, the person gets enough to be able to identify what's happening in his or her surrounding. Get a copy of my book, The Future of the Mind, and also Physics of the Future, where you can read about the artificial retina, that is the ability of science today to compensate for a failing retina and to give the gift of sight to people who have given up. Okay, well, let's take the next listener phone call.
Dr. Kaku, this is Mike in Kennewick, Washington calling, and I listen to you on KONA AM 610 on the AM dial. My question is this. There are certain people who live in, I guess it's in the Caucasus, and they live to be incredible ages. To be over 100 is barely worth talking about. And I was wondering, is it purely genetic that this group of people are living well past 100, or is it because they're not part of modern mainstream society that seems to cause nervous problems and anxiety and stress, and maybe they're eating just certain kinds of more vegetables, their food is better, and it's fresher. What do you think? Can you enlighten me on that?
Okay, well, let's take a short commercial break. But after the break, we're going to answer your question. Can you live longer by eating certain kinds of yogurt? You've all seen the advertisements on television. We'll talk about the Fountain of Youth after the commercial break. And once again, you are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
Don't feel bad. I didn't understand theoretical and dimensional metaphysics the first time either. But if you call and ask, Professor Kaku will get you there. You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
This is the time when you can ask that question that's always been bothering you about science. Give us a call at 866-323-2129. Well, before the break, we had a question that a lot of people were asking several years ago. You've all seen that commercial where you see these old people someplace in Asia eating yogurt. And by golly, they're old. I mean, they're real old. And the implication, of course, is that if you eat this type of yogurt, you too will have the gift of longevity. Well, did you know that people have actually looked at that claim? They've actually visited some of these sites. And what do they find? Well, they found something rather unusual. They found that when you visit these people and ask them how old they are, and then come back a few years later, interview the same people and ask them how old they are, it turns out that they lie. They lie about their age. Even though you know exactly the age difference from when you first interviewed them to the second interview, they lie and they add more years to the age because, look, they're not stupid. They figured it out. They could get on national television. They could get riches far beyond the annual income of a peasant by simply lying to those people who come and wanting that picture, that shot, that money shot where somebody says, hey, I'm 110 years of age because I ate this brand of yogurt. So the short answer is don't believe it. Most of those statements are fake. However, now let's look at the science. If you take a look at studies of longevity, which have been done for decades, you find that one ethnic group has had the world's record for something like 20 years in a row. One ethnic group. And it's not the peasants in some place like Kazakhstan. No, it's Japanese women. Japanese women for 20 years in a row have held the record for longevity. And among Japanese women, you can see that the Okinawan women live the longest among Japanese women. So what is at stake here? Is it just yogurt? Well, we don't know. However, one line of thought is that it's the relative roughage, the relative primitiveness, relatively speaking, of life in Okinawa versus the rest of modernized Japan. Japanese women, their diet is different from the Western diet. Heavily rich in seafood and rice, and very low in animal fat, and very low in sugar. And so, well, we can't prove it, but there seems to be some link between that kind of diet and living longer. Now, you can also show that when you start to look at cancer rates and you start to look at diabetes and a whole host of ills that we associate with living in the West, you can see that there is a correlation to animal fat, there is a correlation to sugar, and even though it's not one-to-one, we can say that, for all intents and purposes, it does appear as if one of the main reasons why Okinawan women live long is because of their lifestyle and their diet. Now, it turns out that when you talk to a gerontologist about the only study that's ever been done that will actually lengthen your lifespan, actually lengthen it under controlled situation, there is such a thing, and it's called caloric restriction. That is literally starving yourself. If you eat 30% less calories, you live 30% longer if you are an animal. This study has never been done on humans because humans, of course, we bellyache too much. We don't want to be put on that diet like that. Anyway, let's take a short commercial break, and after the break, we're going to continue with Science Fantastic.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. For more information on this and other great talk programs, go to talkradionetwork.com.
I want to talk with you about evolution. It's actually a board game. Yes, it's a brand new board game that you can play with your family, and it's called Evolution, the Beginning. A few months ago, I played for the first time. I must say I was a little bit hesitant at first. I wanted to make sure the game was not complicated. Dear old Dad must be able to play the game with the kids at Christmas. So I learned about the goal of the game, and it turns out to be very simple. Eat as much food as possible. To eat the food, each player takes turns creating and evolving their very own species. There's hundreds of ways to evolve your species, and the fun part is, it's up to you. Evolution, the Beginning, is based on science. Your species must adapt and change in order to be competitive. Just like in life, the goal of evolution is to be the fittest. Evolution, the Beginning is only at Target stores. Look for it in the game section. It has a big dinosaur on the box. It's science without feeling like science, and that's the fun. It's all at Target stores. Evolution, the Beginning.
Do you worry a lot? If you're forgetful, nervous, moody, or overwhelmed, chances are you're not protecting yourself from the ravaging effects of stress and anxiety. No matter the cause, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, your quality of life, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in as little as 1 to 2 weeks and increase your ability to recall facts, names, and numbers in 4 to 12 weeks. Calm and Clever was created by scientist Kurt Hendricks, a principal investigator in 2 NIH-funded studies on Alzheimer's disease. Try Calm and Clever for 2 months. You'll feel the difference. Call 1-800-758-8746 or go to calmandclever.com.
Hi, folks. In a world of GMO, genetically modified organisms, that is, chemicals, processed foods, and a healthcare system that's unraveling like a cheap suit, it's time to prepare. God created herbs, and herbs help man. Our body can heal itself, just sometimes we need assistance. You need some help? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Our mild detox is quite powerful with its unique blend of 8 different herbs. And if you're looking for more, our non-GMO supplements will help you with different needs you might have. Health should be a top priority. Take care of your health naturally. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Give your body a treat. Let the herbs do their thing naturally. Read all the testimonies on the website, GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Sickness and viruses are like intruders, and herbs are like warriors. Let the tea work for you. GetTheTea.com.
Listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again on Science Fantastic, we talk about some of the incredible developments in science. And if you want to learn more about that, especially what's happening with the human mind, get a copy of my latest New York Times bestseller, The Future of the Mind. And find out about my tour schedule. Go to my website, mkaku.org. mkaku.org, about where I'll be signing perhaps your copy of my book, The Future of the Mind. Okay, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
Hello, Professor. My name is John, and I'm calling you from Daytona Beach, Florida. I listen to you on AM 1150 and FM 93.5 WNDB. My question is, Doc, about werewolves and lycanthropy. Is it real, or is it just something that Hollywood came up to scare us? I was really curious about that. Many werewolf movies I've seen and read about, I was just curious if it was something based on fact, or if it was just Hollywood trying to scare us. I'll wait for your answer off the line. Thank you.
Well, I think what you're asking is about werewolves, and of course, it's part of urban legends. However, there could be some truth. Certain anthropologists have theorized that many of the mythical animals that we see now in the movies and in novels have some basis in reality. So with werewolves, for example, there is a genetic mutation that induces lycanthropy. In fact, circus shows used to hire these people, these unfortunate individuals that have hair growing literally all over their body. It's a known mutation. It's been analyzed. And in fact, in Mexico, there are actually two acrobats who became rather famous who have lycanthropy. It turns out that originally, as children, these individuals were put in cages and shown to the circus audience. Apparently, according to the story, the son of the circus owner took pity on these two boys that were locked up in a cage and taught them a skill, that is, to become acrobats. And now they are stars of the Mexican circus circuit. And they have this genetic mutation, which has been analyzed, and it's a throwback. You see, we learned, but our genetic makeup changed so that we began to sweat. Sweating is actually very useful for us. It means we can travel long distances and cool off the body. Many animals don't sweat the same way. For example, dogs for the most part lack the sweat glands that we have, and that's why they pant. They pant in order to cool off. because they don't sweat like we do. Hair, of course, interferes with the sweating process, and that's one reason why we lost our hair. And that's one reason why perhaps this genetic mutation, which does appear every once in a while, is a throwback. It's a throwback to an earlier period of time when we had literally hair all over our body. That's also related to goosebumps. People wonder, why is it that we have goosebumps? When you look at our skin microscopically, you realize that goosebumps is exactly the same neurological mechanism that animals have. For example, cats. Cats, when they are afraid, will begin to hiss, and the hair stands up on the back of their neck. It turns out that microscopically, that is very similar to our feeling goosebumps, except, of course, we lost the hair because we learned, well, not learned, but we adapted to sweating rather than, let's say, panting like what a dog does. So, yes, some people have claimed that some of the animals of mythology are a basis in fact. In fact, there's another controversial theory that says that fossil evidence of dinosaurs were actually found by the Greeks thousands of years ago. If you take a look at Greek pottery, you see evidence of monsters that look very similar to the bones, the fossil bones of dinosaurs. Now, of course, no one was there to interview them about whether or not they really did see the bones of a dinosaur, but there is a theory that says that perhaps some of the images that we see in Greek pottery dating back thousands of years is actually an artist's conception of dinosaur bones that were found by the Greeks. And, however, if you also look at medical books, they show medical aberrations of young babies born, many of them not viable, but some of them could be the origin of legends like the Cyclops. There is one genetic mutation where children are born with one eye in the middle, and some people think, maybe the mother had an affair with the Cyclops, and that's why the kid came out that way. Well, of course, that was during the dark ages when there was no science. Now we do have science, and we realize that, yes, genetic mutations do in some sense resemble some of the animals found in mythology. Well, that's it for this segment of Science Fantastic. We have to take a short commercial break, but after the break, we're going to continue our discussion, and you can get on the phone and give us a call at 866-323-2129.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Once again, the lines are open. This hour is your hour. This is the time when you can give us a call at 866-323-2129. Be part of the fun. Give us a call and have your thoughts heard on over 100 radio stations that carry Science Fantastic. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
I know that you have spoke on this subject before, but I'm just curious if you're willing to let us know where Nibiru is located at this point in time, and how long do we have before it gets close?
Okay, well, actually, I get quite a bit of email concerning Nibiru, which is Planet X, a planet that's supposed to be lurking out there beyond the orbit of Pluto. Every time, for example, somebody predicts the end of the world, they say, well, maybe it's Nibiru. Nibiru is going to come barreling down close to the Earth, rip the Earth apart, or throw the Earth into the sun, and that's the reason why we're going to have Armageddon. Well, recently, there was a story coming out of Caltech, which, well, did sound rather familiar. It turns out that the astronomers at Caltech, the scientists that have found evidence of gigantic pieces of ice beyond the orbit of Pluto, have now found indirect evidence, not direct evidence, but indirect evidence that there's a monster planet way out there, way beyond the orbit of Pluto. Now, how did they do this? By looking at the orbital trajectories of these pieces of ice beyond the orbit of Pluto, they found that they were irregular. They didn't move like they were supposed to. Now, objects like planets and asteroids move according to Newton's law of gravity. Newton's laws of gravity are so accurate that they allowed us to actually predict the existence of Neptune. It turned out that over 100 years ago, the orbit of Uranus was slightly wobbly, indicating that perhaps there was another planet out there yanking, tugging on Uranus. And using Newton's laws of gravity, they were able to calculate by hand where this object was to be located. And on the first try, bingo, they found it. A planet actually discovered mathematically first and then verified by telescopic evidence. Well, history may be repeating itself. This time, scientists look at these bodies of ice called the Kuiper Belt beyond the orbit of Pluto, and they found that they too were not orbiting the way they should have. Something was tugging on them. Well, now we have computers, of course, and using the computers, they said that the best fit was a large planet, larger than the Earth, smaller than Neptune, but larger than the Earth, that was lurking way out there in outer space, so far that we have not yet detected it by telescopes. Well, this, of course, has initiated a gold rush. Astronomers are now peering into the heavens, trying to track down visually evidence of this new object. Now, Pluto, to be fair, is no longer a planet. Planets now go from Mercury all the way out to Neptune. Pluto is the oddball. It's really a gigantic piece of ice and rock, part of the Kuiper Belt of comets located beyond the orbit of Neptune. This object, however, is smaller than Neptune, but lies in the Kuiper Belt. So it's mystified astronomers, but hey, the report comes out of Caltech based on the latest computer programs using Newton's laws of gravity, and there seems to be something out there lurking which is larger than the Earth, perhaps 4 times larger than the Earth, but smaller than the planet Neptune. Now, is it going to come barreling by the Earth and create Armageddon? Well, I don't think so. So for all the doomsayers out there who want to predict the next Armageddon, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. However, science will tell. The evidence will reveal whether or not there is, in fact, a planet much larger than the Earth, way out there beyond the orbit of Neptune. Okay, well, moving right along, let's take the next listener phone call.
Hello, Dr. Kaku. I am very interested in your show. This is Dave from Montana, and there's been a considerable amount of talk lately that we only use approximately 10% of our brain. I was wondering, first of all, is that true? And secondly, are there experiments and things being done to help us to try to utilize more of our brain? Thank you very much.
Well, I get a lot of emails about this, especially after the movie Lucy came out, starring Scarlett Johansson, where this ordinary woman is involved in an accident which increases her IQ so that she uses not just 10% of her brain, but 20, 50, finally 100% of the brain, where she becomes, at the end of the movie, almost like a godlike figure, capable of manipulating matter and energy to her will. Well, you know, scientists have actually looked at this question, do we really only use 10% of our brain? And we've actually tried to track down where it comes from. To the best of our knowledge, it comes from a comic book. Comic books back in the 50s, I still remember them, used to have these little snippets of pseudoscientific information. And the earliest sighting of this urban legend comes from a comic book. Now, is it true? And the answer is no. We use all our brain. However, that doesn't mean we live up to our potential. Okay, and that, I think, is where we have to concentrate. We have to learn to have long-term perspectives, long-term goals, and what I call butt power, that is the ability to sit down and patiently work things through to completion. But how much of the brain do we use? We use all the brain. So don't think we're going to get a shortcut to superhuman powers as in the movie Lucy. Okay, well, we've run out of time, so once again, you've been listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Join us every week when we discover the cutting edge of science on Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. And once again, you can always give us a call 24/7. 24/7. Give us a call at 866-323-2129. Leave your name, telephone number, and leave your name, call letters of the radio station you're calling from and the city that you're calling from, and perhaps you can get on national radio. So once again, you've been listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.
You're listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku.